Shalom Talmidim, Hatanuot Ha'ivrit Perek Yod Beit. The Hebrew Vowels, Lesson 12. The Rules of Shewa. Two vocal shewas cannot remain side by side in Hebrew. There will usually be some change in the vowels. There are two rules that will help us recognize what has happened once the vowels have changed. Here's the first rule. When two regular vocal shewas would be next to each other in a word, the first will become a chirik and the second will become a silent shewa. This usually happens when the conjunction v, or when one of the prefixed prepositions le, b, or k is added to a word beginning with vocal shewa. So the first shewa becomes chirik and the second becomes a silent shewa. Here's an example. Like a virgin. We have the noun bethula, virgin, and we want to put the preposition k, like, onto the front of it. Well, first we stick them together, and we would find the form kvthula, both k and v having vocal shewas. You see, there's an asterisk next to this, meaning this form doesn't actually occur. Instead, the first shewa, the shewa under the kaf, becomes a chirik, and the vocal shewa under the beit becomes a silent shewa. So instead of kvthula, we have kivthula. Now there's an exception to this rule. When the second shewa is under a yod, it will simply disappear when the first shewa becomes chirik. Take the phrase to Judah. Yehuda is Judah, and we want to add l onto it. We would get the form le Yehuda, but here we have two vocal shewas side by side, le ye, which doesn't work. So it becomes li Huda, but notice that there is no shewa written under the yod. Li Huda. So that's a small exception to this first rule, that under a yod, if it's the second consonant, the silent shewa that would result just disappears. Now here's the second rule. When a vocal shewa is followed by a composite shewa, a chatef vowel, then the simple vocal shewa, the first shewa, becomes the corresponding short vowel to the composite shewa, and the composite shewa remains unchanged. So when you have a vocal shewa plus a composite shewa, the vocal shewa becomes the short vowel that corresponds to the composite shewa. Let's look at in a dream. Dream is chalom with chatef patach. We want to add b, in, onto it, and we would get the form b'chalom, but that doesn't work. We can't have a vocal shewa followed by a composite shewa. So instead of vocal shewa under the beit, we get a patach, b'chalom, b'chalom. Do you see the vocal shewa under the beit becomes a patach, the short vowel that corresponds to the hatef patach under the het. Let's take another example. Like truth, we have emeth, and we want to add k to it. K emeth becomes ke emeth, ke emeth, ke emeth, with a segol to correspond to the chatef segol. Or here is 2/10. Le and ahalim. Well, le ahalim has two vocal shewas next to each other, a vocal shewa and a composite shewa. So the lamed, instead of having vocal shewa, will have qamatz chatuf, the short o, corresponding to the hatef qamatz under the aleph. Lo halim. Lo halim. There's also one exception to this second rule. Whenever v or a similar particle is prefixed to Elohim, God, instead of ve'elohim, as we might expect, with a segol under the vav, corresponding to the chatef segol under the aleph, instead we find the form ve'elohim. The chatef segol has disappeared entirely under the aleph, and instead of a segol under the vav, we get a tzere, ve'elohim. This is unusual and somewhat irregular, but it's also very common in the Hebrew Bible, so you shouldn't, after a while, have any trouble recognizing it. And in any case, in this form, ve'elohim, we have almost everything that we expect from Elohim, except for one vowel. So it's clearly God. And then up front, we have a vav. We will see that when you have a vav at the beginning of a word, it is almost always a conjunction and.